we right now have Joe Sestak on the phone, and welcome to the program this morning.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me here.
I've got to find out, why are you walking from Bloomsburg to Berwick this morning?
I've actually been asked. When I walked 422 miles across Pennsylvania after I declared my candidacy at Constitution Hall to show people that I wanted to walk in their shoes, that I wanted to ensure that I understood their concerns, whether they were seniors or whether it was small businessmen and women. I got requests from throughout Pennsylvania, from Erie to Wilkes-Barre and other places to continue that. Why aren't you walking in our area? So I'm going to do an education event today, the cost of it, at Bloomsburg, because they asked me to come there at the university and speak. And then I'll walk that evening about 12 miles up to the dinner that evening, get there about 8 o'clock, say a few words to the assembled group.
Well, you are interested in investing in knowledge in Pennsylvania. Kind of go into that with some detail, Joe.
I would, thanks. In my 31 years in the Navy, when I joined up, I had 5 chief petty officers during the Vietnam War era. Those guys that keep the ships really working, and senior enlisted. Only one had graduated from high school. By the time I was commanding a carrier battle group in the war, in Afghanistan, then over slipped through the straits into the Persian Gulf, if you could not become a senior chief petty officer in the Navy unless you earned at least an associate's college degree in a technology, because we so valued education. I consider education our homeland defense. And I am going to talk on several issues. First, community colleges. Man, what a great first step. And yet, in Pennsylvania, all our colleges, only 5% are community colleges. Throughout the nation, 25% are community colleges. That's why 60% of youth or adults who go to college are in a community college today. And guess what? In Pennsylvania, it's only 28%. So that, with the cost of education going up, is a great way to get an education, particularly with manufacturing coming home from China, as you have been reading about. And we have a deficit of 5 million people who can be the artisans, the welders, the nanofabricators. And so that's one area I'm going to talk about today. Let me stop with that one, because I also want to talk about the rising tuition for 4-year colleges.
Okay, I want to just ask you this. Bernie Sanders, running for president of the United States, would like free education for all students, I think from pretty much birth till graduation. Are you on board with that?
Well, we have a national debt right now that's got to be addressed. No, I mean, everybody should have skin in the game. I'm a big believer in that. Look, in the military, we did pay for everybody's education to get that associate's college degree. But guess what? It was on their time. I mean, in their night hours and things like that. But I do believe in investing. So I do believe in, for example, what the Republican President Eisenhower established, which is really basically today's Stafford loan system, government loans that right now today, if we keep at the same interest rate, so students can get a loan to go to college, the government's going to make $127 billion over the next 10 years. That's why in my book, Restore the American Dream, it says we've got the wrong interest rate there. We should have it based on the 10-year and the 30-year Treasury bonds, because most youth repay back at the 15-year point, and the rest large cohort is around 25. So therefore, the government would make, if we base it on those Treasury bonds, basically no money, and we'd lower their interest rate by about half. So there's a practical way to do things to get access to money to go to college and pay it back, but not have actually the government going into deficit or making money. No, there's a proper way to do this. There's skin in the game that everybody should have, and that's the American dream, rugged individualism, although always aligned with the common effort that we're all in this together.
I missed telling you, Joe, that my co-host here is Ben Reichley.
Hi, Ben.
Ben has a question for you, I suspect.
Yeah, Joe, good to talk to you again, and enjoyed having you in the studio, I guess, about 3 years ago. I hate to say it's gone that long. But quick question, looking at your proposal, and how do we mix that with the business models of universities when we talk about community college and practical education, because these universities have set themselves up and their business model is really pulling students into their systems, the high cost, but without this 4-year education, you're going nowhere. And in the real world, and you just talked about it in the military, I see it within the waterworks infrastructure industry, the highway infrastructure industry, that students with 2-year degrees or students with practical knowledge can go in, get a 2-year degree, and move up within organizations. So it's almost going to say, hang on to the 4-year universities. You have a place, but you're not going to be the straw that's going to stir the drink of education in the United States.
You know, I think if I copied you down correctly, Ben, you are spot on, as we say in the military. Look, I think we want people to go to 4-year colleges. We want people to get doctorate degrees and master's degree and do the research at National Institute of Health and lead us into the future. But I started in the Navy having the welders, the plumbers on the ship. That was my job. I had the machinist mate, the electricians. Today, to be a welder in Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, right down here where I am, where my father worked, and now called Acker Shipyard, you have to sit at a computer and design the bead to be laid by a machine. And we are importing 180 people from outside Pennsylvania to be welders there, because our school system in Philadelphia, that only graduates about 1/3 of its males in the city graduate, aren't having those who could go into these types of wonderful jobs to have great living as you go forward. And if I hear you correctly, you are spot on. You go to these community colleges, you go get a certificate, and you can have a great job, because that's why I, in the GI Bill, submitted an amendment that said, wait a minute, when a kid comes home, maybe he or she doesn't want to go to a 4-year college. He wants to have a great job, you know, and wants to become a MIG or a TIG welder, and so let's let them get a certificate. So that's why it's not all about going into a 4-year college. It is a great step to go to a community college, and that's why Pennsylvania has to fix its deficit in the number of community colleges we have.
Now, one thing, Joe, you talk about is on your walk from the borders of Pennsylvania, east and west, is the biggest deficit in America, not so much on the monetary side, but it's the trust deficit.
Yes.
And is that, as you're talking about, as we see the political season moving, but the trust deficit in the leadership, lack of leadership, the wrong leadership in this country?
You know, my book begins with those exact words. The biggest deficit we have in America is not the national debt. It is the trust deficit. It's why I did that walk. And as I walked, I told everybody, it is not about party. It is not about type. It's about people. I'm an independent who happens to be a Democrat. But I did that walk, and as you know, I'm running against the desires of the Washington, D.C. Democratic leadership down there who wants to control everything of what you say and what you do. We have forgotten people, and here's the issue. People know that leaders in both parties are more willing to say something here in Pennsylvania, but vote a separate way in D.C. to hold on to their job. Look, I went to teach after I lost the Senate race by 2 points at five different universities and colleges in Pennsylvania. I went back to learn and be with the youth of America. But I turned down a lobbying job that 433 people who left Congress and the Senate went to do, like Senator Toomey did after leaving Congress. And you know what? That's why people know that that those who are supposed to be serving them are more interested in holding on to their job. Trust has been broken. And like in the Navy, if a captain is looked like they're above accountability, won't be held accountable for doing what they should do, the crew loses trust and won't follow that captain. And that's what's happening in America today.
We have an email here, Joe, from it's unsigned. Please ask Mr. Sestak his position on the gas tax. Pat Toomey is spreading that he wants to raise it. Do you want to raise the gas tax?
No, I think eventually we can do away with the gas tax. Look, we've got to fix our transportation system, all right? There's not a question about it that when Pennsylvania ranks in the top 9 states of most efficient bridges and is next to last of all 50 states in terms of an efficient, effective transportation road system. We've got problems here in the Commonwealth, and there's different ways to address it. Number one, public-private ventures, not just government. Look what Indiana did. They rented out its toll road to a company, I think it was about 70 years, got billions of dollars for that rental, and then used the money to fix the rest of its transportation system, and Indiana's bond rating shot to AAA. So now it can borrow money for other things if it wants to at a much less rate. And so that's the common sense way to do it. I'm watching, so eventually in my book I say the gasoline tax might go away as people like Texas, states are starting to look at what's called, and I'm not saying we'd go that way, but like a usage fee. So if somebody has a hybrid car and drives 10 miles but only uses half the gas as a farmer who has maybe a car that is not as fuel efficient and has it maintained it because farmers are so industrious for 10 years, but it goes 10 miles, but it uses twice as much gas. That farmer's being penalized, and that guy with that other one. So we need to look at these different ways to approach it. And in my book, I say if we do these various means, infrastructure banks, etc., hopefully the gas tax eventually will go away.
Let me ask you a couple of quick questions. One is you're also going to be speaking about equal pay for equal work for women and the LGBT equality. Quick comment on that before we let you go.
Absolutely. Look, I'll never forget that night over Afghanistan where I had 8 pilots up there. And a young woman pilot, brand new, was one of the 7 who disregarded orders to dive, not to dive without permission, low, because we thought the Taliban had some Stinger missiles. And we wanted to check it out, but she thought she couldn't wait. So she dove, disregarding orders, and saved 4 special forces. The other 4 had died, and those 4 men picked up their dead and came home. But she got equal pay as any other pilot up there that night. We know that women make, depending upon the study, 77 cents to 92 cents on the dollar. There's a lot of studies out there, but that's basically it. And the law for equal pay of 50 years ago has a loophole in it. So, yes, I'm for the Paycheck Fairness Act that Senator Toomey has filibustered or voted against 7 times because I believe in equal pay for equal work, and there's a small loophole that people are using on that thing. And as far as the LGBT community, I went to war, and I knew, we all knew, who was gay and all. And when we came home, I wanted those pilots, I wanted those crew members to have the actually same rights as everyone else. And that's what I learned in the Navy. Everybody, like our independence, circulation attendants, was equal. And that's that's how I feel about the LGBT community. There's a valued members of our mission in the Navy, and they're valued members and should get absolute equality here at home.
Well, Joe Sestak,
for our society here.
Candidate for U.S. Senator in Pennsylvania. He's walking to Bloomsburg, or from Bloomsburg to Berwick. Where are you now? Are you started yet?
I'm just about to leave Delaware County and drive up there to go to the event at Bloomsburg University, where I'll be talking about other education issues and how to have the other things and have the universities control costs. Back to Ben's great issue, these universities with the inflation rate of education greater than food or anything else, wait a moment here. We've got to make them understand that if you're getting public money through loans or Pell Grants, you're going to be held accountable to showing us where you're spending our money and why is this tuition going up so much. And then I'll walk from there at about 3:15, the 12 miles to the dinner over in Berwick. So I'll leave Bloomsburg to walk to Berwick at about 3:15.
Joe Sestak, again, candidate for U.S. Senator in Pennsylvania, facing Pat Toomey in about a year and a month or something like that. A year and a week, I guess, will be the election time.
Well,
so
you'll have a primary in the spring, correct?
That is correct. Yeah. Will do. But my thing is focus on people. It doesn't matter who gets in or doesn't get in. Look, the establishment tried to get 7 people in against me, and the 7th one accepted. They just feel that you got to be a party loyalist before you're a people loyalist.
Do you feel a little bit in the political world now? Do you feel a little bit like a Jim Webb or a Fiorina or a Trump or a Carson? Do you feel sort of like, hold on, I'm an outside guy questioning the establishment, and the establishment is sort of turning around trying to shut the door on me. So a little bit of frustration at times?
No frustration at
or
all.
Motivation,
when I did that walk
motivation
across
for you.
Pennsylvania, reason I went back to teach is I ran in 2010, as you know, after being asked to run for Senate, and then I finally agreed after turning it down several times against Senator Specter. Then he switched parties, and I stayed in the race despite the president on down just all supporting Specter. I learned then what I learned in the Navy. It is about your sailors, and in politics it's about people. So when I did it this time, as you know, maybe even before Trump and Webb and everything, I was kind of out there saying, no, I'll do this for people. No, I think that what you see happening with Trump is he's mining a vein of that same distrust. Whether you agree or don't agree with Trump, he's mining the same vein of the distrust of political leaders, of party leadership, like in Washington, D.C., of both parties. And so, as I said, I'm an independent who happens to be a Democrat, and I will first and foremost be an independent representative of people. And I represented a Republican district as a congressman. In my second race, I only spent $28,000 in yard signs to win by 20 points. It is about people, and that's how I'm going to run in the primary as well as the general. Just focus on people.
Well, have a safe walk today, and Dan and I will. You'll have a great day up here in Central Pennsylvania to get out and walk, and it should be a very interesting event for you.
Thanks a lot,
Dan and Ben. Both you guys appreciate being on again.
Thank you for joining us this morning, Joseph.